Hi, I'm Pearl Whitfield, and I am going to be doing a series of readings from my new book, The Storekeeper, A Tale of Small Town Life, which is available on Amazon, starting with Chapter 1. I'll be doing it in little pieces of Chapter 1. Friday morning found Ralph still in his recliner. His body was used to it after months at Ruth's bedside. The hospital bed and all her equipment filled half the living room, and at night he rearranged enough to drag the recliner up close and hold her hand. After she died and the living room returned to normal, well, there was no normal anymore, just a big emptiness, he moved the recliner back to the sitting area. But he never slept in their queen bed again. Their bed. He couldn't be in it alone. Ralph and Rusty went downstairs. The morning was slightly overcast and the air had a new nip. Ralph left both the back door to the building and the back door to the store open and started to make coffee. Rusty returned in a few minutes. He now had a water bowl next to the wood stove. He gulped down half the bowl, then circled till he had the floor right and lay down. The little girl was not there when Ralph opened the blind. The coffee boys ambled in and got their mugs. Today they stayed inside and talked about the change in weather and if it would be an early winter again. They sure needed a good snowpack. All the fishing holes had dried up by mid-July. Ralph listened with half his brain while he stocked the refrigerators and shelves. He didn't contribute to the conversation. When the cowbell announced Mrs. Adams, Ralph stifled a grimace. She looked like a woman on a mission. Marching over to the counter, she began her interrogation. "I see you inherited the brat. Did you pay extra for her?" Ralph looked past her and saw the little girl in her corner on the steps. He realized he didn't even know her name. After a week, he'd never heard her make a sound. "Excuse me," he said. "Loretta had a good heart, but she could never set a limit," Mrs. Adams continued shrilly. The boys' conversation had stilled. "She never knew when helping wasn't helping. That little girl is nothing but trouble. I've seen her here every day, and it doesn't look like anyone else is going to tell you." She shot a venomous glance at the boys, who began to take their mugs to the back and wash them. "Mrs. Adams, that little girl hasn't done me any harm. She just sits and watches the street. She's very quiet. She never comes inside." "She's quiet because she can't talk, Mr. Johnson. That's why she's quiet. She's retarded, and she's retarded because of her mother." The boys sidled out past Mrs. Adams. "That's right, you boys just go on out of here like you had nothing to do with it," Mrs. Adams spat. "Everyone knows what her mother does, but no one knows who sired that girl." Ralph was stunned. His shock registered on the upright Christian lady in front of him. She collected her face and lowered her voice. Her permed head nodded apologetically. "I'm sorry to be the one, Mr. Johnson, but you should know the truth before you go getting suckered." "Well, where does she live?" Ralph managed. "That shack out past the railroad tracks, next street over from your backyard." "I didn't know anyone lived there," he said. "I thought it was abandoned. I never see a light there or any sign of life." The shack was a misfit in the town, which generally was well kept. He'd figured it was just a leftover from when the railroads ran regularly. It leaned like it couldn't last another snow load, and the windows were mostly covered with cardboard. "It is abandoned. Jessie squats there, and the police don't do a thing. We've tried at the church to help Jessie, but she doesn't want help. She needs to go to jail, and the little girl needs to go to a home." The little girl was staring through the door at him. Ralph wondered if she had heard Mrs. Adams. How much did she understand? Could she even hear? Lucky for Ralph, the phone rang. He lifted the receiver, which had to be an antique. How many phones still had that rotary dial and heavy black handset? "L&B's, how can I help you?" he crooned. Mrs. Adams watched a moment, then started checking the shelves. "Ralph, this is Gloria over at the senior center. Do you have sugar? We've run out, and I'm in the middle of baking this month's birthday cake." "Oh, hi, Gloria. Yes, we've got plenty of sugar. I'll have a bag ready for you." "Thanks a million, Ralph. You're a lifesaver. I'll bring you a piece of cake this afternoon." "That would be fine, Gloria. Glad I can help." Ralph breathed a sigh of relief when he hung up and wondered if there was somewhere to hide. "Dream on, you're a one-man operation here, buddy," his mind replied. He decided it was time to do more restocking and went out back until he heard the cowbell. Gloria came up to the counter. Mrs. Adams immediately appeared with her basket. Gloria took the sugar with more thanks. As Ralph totted up Mrs. Adams' total and wrote it in her account book, he decided she was right. He shouldn't be suckered any longer. He would make a sign announcing a new store policy. No more credit accounts. Debit accounts welcome. People could deposit money to their accounts and he would debit purchases. When they reached zero, they'd need to put down some more money. Mrs. Adams walked down the steps as far away from the little girl as possible, like she might catch something if she got too close. Ralph decided he wanted to know the little girl's name. He got a donut and a small carton of milk and started toward the door. Then he went back for a napkin and a straw. As soon as he opened the door, Rusty went through it and sat down near the little girl. She shrank back, but didn't seem as tense. Ralph pulled up his rocker and offered her the donut and milk. She looked at him. "So, what's your name? You come every day, but I don't know your name. I thought you might like a little something." Rusty looked at the donut and started to drool. "Not for you, Rusty, it's for your friend. I'll get you a biscuit later." When he heard biscuit, Rusty wagged his long tail. A few leaves had collected on the porch overnight, and his tail caught them and scritched across the boards. The little girl looked at Rusty's tail. "Look at that," Ralph thought. "She can definitely hear." The dirty little hand reached tentatively toward Ralph's. "Go ahead," Ralph encouraged. "Take it. I'll open the milk for you." The skinny fingers closed on the donut. Rusty watched the transaction closely but didn't move. The little girl broke off a piece of donut and put it in her mouth. Ralph was trying to get the paper off the straw, but he could see something change in her face. It wasn't a smile, not exactly, but a satisfied relaxation. He realized he'd been holding his breath and exhaled. "There you go, I finally got the dang wrapper off," he exclaimed and handed her the milk carton. Both hands full now, the little girl hesitated. She looked at Rusty, then put the donut between her feet and took a sip of milk. Then another, and another. She put the carton between her feet and broke off another piece of donut. Ralph caught himself staring. "Well, okay then," he said. "I guess I'll sweep the porch." He brought out the broom and watched surreptitiously as he cleared leaves. When there was just one little piece of donut left, the little girl looked at it. Then she looked at Rusty, whose eyes had not left her. She put the piece down on the porch between her and the big dog. He watched, but didn't move. She looked up at Ralph, who had stopped sweeping. "It's okay, Rusty, you can eat it," Ralph said. "Your friend is giving you a treat." Rusty's long pink tongue instantly looped around the morsel, and his leafy tail scritched back and forth. To be continued.